The early morning sun filtered to the maple tree, casting golden ripples across the crystal-clear water of my koi pond. The gentle sound of water trickling from a small stone fountain filled the air, blending seamlessly with the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze. This was my sanctuary, my escape. I had built this pond from scratch over 3 years, turning my backyard into a personal retreat. After my divorce, I had poured all my energy into creating something beautiful, something alive. My koi were not just fish. They were my companions in silence, my floating pieces of art. Some were rare Japanese imports, their scales shimmering in the sunlight like living jewels. Each morning, I would sit on my wooden deck, sipping my coffee, watching them move in elegant, unhurried patterns. But peace, I would soon learn, was a fragile thing in Sycamore Heights. The first sign that something was wrong came as a frantic phone call from my neighbor, Marcus. His voice was tight with urgency, something I had never heard from him before. "You need to get home. Now. There's something wrong with your backyard." I didn't even ask questions. The dread in his voice was enough to send me speeding through the quiet suburban streets. My mind raced with possibilities, but nothing could prepare me for what I saw when I screeched into my driveway. A large cement mixer truck, its drum still churning lazily, was rolling away from my house. The logo Sunshine Construction was painted on the side, its bright yellow lettering in stark contrast to the darkness pooling in my stomach. The driver avoided eye contact as I jumped out of my car, my pulse hammering. What the hell is going on? I shouted, but the truck picked up speed and disappeared down the street. My gut twisted as I sprinted through my side gate. Then I saw it, where my beautiful koi pond had once sparkled under the dappled shade. Now lay a dull, gray slab of concrete. It was still wet around the edges, the smell of cement thick in the air. My heart pounded in disbelief. My knees buckled as I took slow, hesitant steps forward. And then, oh God, scattered across the hardening surface, trapped like fossils in amber, were the shimmering scales of my beloved fish. Tiny specks of color amidst the sea of gray. The world blurred as the realization crashed over me. They had been buried alive. A sickening wave of rage and grief twisted in my chest. My hands clenched into fists, fingernails biting into my palms. 3 years of love, of careful work, destroyed in a single afternoon. I barely registered Marcus stepping up beside me. "I tried to stop them," he said, his voice shaking. They had papers. Said it was an official HOA order. The HOA. My jaw locked. My breath came in short. Shallow bursts as a name formed on my lips. Who did this? Marcus exhaled sharply, his face hard. Deborah Wilson. I should have known. Deborah Wilson, the president of the Sycamore Heights Homeowners Association, had ruled the neighborhood like a tyrant for years. She was the kind of woman who measured lawns with a ruler and sent violation notices if your mailbox wasn't approved shade of beige. But this was beyond anything I could have imagined. My fingers tightened around my phone as I hit dial. She picked up on the first ring. "This is highly inappropriate," she said smoothly, as if she had been expecting my call. HOA matters should be addressed through proper channels, not personal phone calls. I was shaking. "You filled my pond with concrete. Your unapproved water feature violated Covenant 37B, she said, her voice infuriatingly calm. The board voted unanimously to remedy the situation. Remedy? My voice cracked. You killed my fish. You destroyed my property. You didn't even warn me. Notice was provided via certified mail 2 weeks ago, she said coolly. Your failure to respond was taken as acceptance of the board's decision. I sucked in a breath, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. I never received any notice, I hissed. Perhaps you should check your mail more carefully. Her tone was almost amused. You can't just come onto my property and destroy something I built with my own money. Actually, I can. Read your HOA agreement. Paragraph 12 gives the board full authority to address violations at the homeowner's expense. You'll be receiving a bill shortly for today's work. And then she hung up. I stood there, staring at the screen, my mind a whirlwind of disbelief, fury, and something darker, something that burned slow and deep. Marcus placed a hand on my shoulder. She's been doing this to everyone who crosses her. His words barely registered. My pulse roared in my ears as I turned back to the cold slab of concrete that had once been my sanctuary. Deborah Wilson had made a mistake. She thought she could get away with this. She thought no one would fight back. She was wrong. I stormed into my house, my fingers shaking as I yanked open my laptop. If Deborah wanted to play dirty, I would play smart. I pulled up my property records, scanning through the legal documents. Everything was in order. My pond had been well within my property lines. So how had the HOA justified destroying it? A knock at my door snapped me out of my thoughts. When I opened it, there was no one there, just an envelope, thick and slightly crumpled, sitting on my welcome mat. Frowning, I picked it up. Inside were copies of property surveys for every house in Sycamore Heights, including mine. A yellow sticky note was attached. Not all the surveys matched county records. M. Marcus? I hurried to my kitchen table, spreading the documents out. My eyes darted between the HOA's version of my property survey and the official records. And then I saw it. According to the HOA's doctored survey, my backyard extended 5 feet, less than the official county records. 5 feet. That meant, on paper, half my koi pond had been on HOA common property. It had been a setup, a manufacturer violation. My hands trembled as I flipped through the documents. The same thing had been done to at least 6 other homeowners, all people who had publicly disagreed with Deborah at HOA meetings. This wasn't just about my pond. This was fraud. I was still staring at the papers when headlights swept across my window. A car pulled into Deborah's driveway across the street, but it wasn't her usual white Mercedes. It was a pickup truck with the Sunshine Construction logo. I moved to the window, peering through the blinds. A man stepped out and embraced Deborah before they both walked inside. Through the open curtains, I saw them laughing, raising wine glasses and a toast. Then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Her garage door was open. Inside was the same concrete mixer truck that had destroyed my pond. And against the back wall, stacks of cement bags labeled property of Lakeside Community Center. Our HOA fees had recently included a special assessment for renovating that community center. Had she been stealing materials meant for public projects? And just how deep did the corruption go? As I grabbed my phone to take pictures, only one thought filled my mind. Deborah Wilson had been operating like she was untouchable. It was time to prove her wrong. I barely slept that night. Instead, I pored over the documents, my fingers tightening every time I uncovered another inconsistency, another fraudulent transfer, another name on a list of people Deborah had screwed over. The deeper I dug, the clearer the pattern became. Sunshine Construction had been paid for 17 separate emergency maintenance projects over the past year, projects that no one in the neighborhood had ever seen completed. The payments were staggeringly high, tens of thousands of dollars drained from our HOA fees, all signed off by Deborah without board approval. And then the final piece fell into place. A shell company, D. Wilson Consulting, money funneled from the HOA account into Sunshine Construction, then transferred in identical amounts to this private account. Deborah wasn't just abusing her power. She was stealing from us. A knock at my door startled me. It was nearly midnight. I hesitated for only a second before opening it to find Marcus, standing there, breathless, a USB drive clenched in his fist. "My daughter works part-time at the bank," he said, stepping inside quickly. She noticed something weird about the HOA account. I took the drive from him, plugged it into my laptop, and what I saw made my stomach churn. There was large sums of money moving between the HOA account, Sunshine Construction, and D. Wilson Consulting. Deborah had been running a classic embezzlement scheme, right under our noses. I exhaled sharply. "We need proof that she's behind the shell company." Marcus smirked and pointed to a section of the statement. "The last transaction, look at the account holder." I leaned in closer. My jaw clenched. It wasn't even subtle. D. Wilson Consulting, account holder, Deborah Wilson. I sat back, adrenaline surging. This is enough to take her down. Marcus nodded. But if we go straight to the cops, she'll find a way to cover her tracks. We need to expose her publicly. Make it so big that she can't slither out of it. A slow smile spread across my face. I think I know just how to do that. The next morning, I sent out a single message to a dozen neighbors. Emergency meeting at Marcus's garage tonight. Bring your HOA violation notices. Bring your stories. It's time to fight back. By 7 p.m., the garage was packed. Mrs. Patel, the Rodriguez family, Eliza, Tom Reynolds, people who had been silently suffering under Deborah's reign for years. The tension in the air was thick, but so was the spark of something new. Hope, she did what to your fish? Mrs. Patel's voice rang through the small space. Her usually soft features twisted in outrage as I showed them photos of my concrete-filled pond. This isn't the first time, Tom muttered, shaking his head. Last month, she had my wheelchair ramp removed while I was at physical therapy. Said it was an unapproved structure. The board had approved it years ago. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group. The stories kept coming. Eliza's vegetable garden, ripped out for being a non-aesthetic addition. The Rodriguez family's basketball hoop, confiscated while they were at church. 3 bird baths. A children's tree house. Fines for Christmas lights. Fines for wind chimes. Fines for having a slightly cracked driveway. Deborah had been systematically crushing anyone who dared to stand up to her. So, why hasn't anyone stopped her? I asked, looking around. Marcus sighed. Because Deborah works for the biggest real estate company in town. Cross her, and suddenly your house develops issues during inspection when you try to sell. People are scared. Mrs. Patel set down her teacup with a sharp click. My son is a lawyer. He says if we want to take her down, we need solid evidence, not just complaints. I nodded and pulled up my laptop, casting the financial records onto the garage wall. Is this enough evidence? I asked. The room fell silent. Then Eliza leaned forward, her lips pressing into a thin line. We confront her at the HOA meeting. The community center was buzzing with tension by the time the meeting started. Deborah sat at the head of the table, her pearl necklace catching the fluorescent light as she shuffled papers, playing the picture-perfect authority figure. But the moment she saw me walking with a thick folder of documents and a dozen homeowners flanking me, I saw it, the briefest flicker of unease in her eyes. She recovered quickly. First agenda item, she announced, property maintenance violations. A slideshow flickered on the screen. A photo of a patch of dead grass near my mailbox appeared. Homeowner has been fined and has 5 days to remedy, she stated flatly. I raised my hand. That brown patch magically appeared yesterday, right after someone was photographed on my lawn. I have security camera footage being analyzed. This was a bluff. My cameras would only be installed tomorrow, but Deborah's face twitched. She moved on, ignoring me. The meeting dragged through budget discussions, community event announcements, until new business, she finally said. I stood. I'd like to submit a proposal for a replacement water feature on my property. Her gaze sharpened. Your unapproved pond has already been addressed. This would be a new installation, I said, walking toward the table with my documents. And I brought the original county property survey, since there seems to be some confusion about my boundary lines. I slid the papers across the table. Her fingers clenched, because right there in black and white was the real survey, the one that showed my pond had always been on my property. And suddenly, all those falsified property surveys, they weren't just mistakes. They were fraud. Murmurs spread through the room. Deborah's knuckles whitened around her gavel. This will need to be reviewed. Point of order, Marcus called from the back. Bylaw 8.3 states new business must be addressed if time allows. We're well under the 2-hour limit. A ripple of agreement. Deborah's jaw tightened. Fine, she snapped. Your proposal is denied based on aesthetic considerations. I raised an eyebrow. On what specific aesthetic grounds? The room went dead silent. Deborah faltered. The other board members exchanged uneasy glances. Mrs. Patel, sitting near the front, flipped open the HOA rulebook. Bylaw 12.4 states aesthetic denials must cite specific covenant violations, she read aloud. Do you have one? More murmurs. Deborah's authority, her absolute control, was publicly slipping. I stepped closer. You see, Deborah, we've been looking into your decisions, and we found some very interesting things. I turned the projector and clicked to the next slide. A bank statement. $15,000 from HOA fees, paid directly to Sunshine Construction. Another slide. Identical amounts transferred to D. Wilson Consulting. One final slide. Deborah's signature on the transfers. She stood so fast her chair screeched against the floor. This meeting is over. Actually, I said, it's just getting started. I turned to Jim Caldwell, the real estate executive sitting in the back. I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, Mr. Caldwell. Would Sycamore Properties consider fraudulent HOA financial practices a liability issue? Deborah paled. Jim Caldwell folded his arms. Yes, he said slowly. Yes, we would. And just like that, the walls around Deborah Wilson began to crumble. Deborah was cornered, but she wasn't going down without a fight. As murmurs spread through the room, she gripped the gavel like a lifeline. This is nonsense, she snapped. These accusations are baseless, and this meeting is officially adjourned. But the homeowners weren't leaving. The tide had turned. Then, as if fate itself had a sense of humor, a commotion erupted outside. You might want to see this, Marcus muttered, peering through the community center's window. We all turned. Outside, just across the street, a growing crowd was gathering near Deborah's house. And in the middle of it, her white Mercedes, parked in her open garage, now encased in rapidly hardening concrete. Someone gasped. I had no words. The rain from earlier that day had created a runoff stream. The cement mixer truck from Sunshine Construction had been leaking its excess load all along the curb, and gravity had done the rest. It had all flowed right into Deborah's garage. I had never seen her move so fast. She pushed through the crowd, wailing as she clawed at the solidifying sludge around her car's wheels. Do something, she screeched at the Sunshine Construction workers. But they stood frozen. They knew, as well as the rest of us, that the damage was irreversible. Mrs. Patel folded her arms. Well, looks like someone has an unapproved driveway modification. Laughter rippled through the crowd. I could have walked away right then, letting fate have the final word. But no, this wasn't over yet. I turned back toward the community center. We need to make sure she can't weasel her way out of this. It was time to call the media. By sunrise, news vans lined the street. Reporters interviewed homeowners, one after another, as they eagerly shared stories of HOA abuse. Marcus explained the financial evidence with the ease of an accountant who had been waiting for this moment his entire life. Mrs. Patel pulled out HOA violation notices she had kept for years, absurd fines for things as petty as having a blue flower pot. Eliza shared records of the fraudulent property surveys. And me? I stood in front of the cameras, looking straight into the lens. This is what happens when people abuse power for personal gain. I said, Deborah Wilson destroyed my pond, killed my koi, and stole from his community. But today, we take our neighborhood back. Meanwhile, Deborah had barricaded herself inside her house. She didn't come out, not even when police officers arrived with a search warrant. The HOA board tried to distance themselves, but was too late. Two members turned on Deborah immediately, revealing that she had coerced them into signing off on shady deals. And the real nail in the coffin? The bank records. The district attorney got involved within 48 hours. Fraud, embezzlement, misuse of HOA funds, tampering with official property documents. Each new revelation was another weight pressing down on her house of lies. And when they finally took her away in handcuffs, the whole neighborhood was there to watch. Deborah wasn't the only one going down. Her brother-in-law, the owner of Sunshine Construction, flipped on her immediately. Turns out, she had been running the same scam in 2 previous neighborhoods. The total amount she had stolen? Nearly $500,000. The state froze her assets. Her house was seized. Her pristine white Mercedes, freed from its concrete prison, but never the same again, was towed away. And Sycamore Heights? For the first time in years, the neighborhood felt alive. The HOA called for an emergency meeting in the park. Over 100 people showed up. "We need a new board," Marcus announced. "People who will serve the community, not themselves." Names were suggested. Votes were cast. Then someone nominated me. I nearly choked on my coffee. "I what?" "You stood up when no one else would," Tom said. "That's all the qualification we need." The motion passed. I was now the new HOA treasurer. I had spent years fighting the system. Now I was going to fix it. And my first act as treasurer, I approved the rebuilding of my koi pond. A few weeks later, volunteers gathered in my backyard. Eliza's husband sketched out a bigger and better pond design. Tom's teenage sons helped dig. Mrs. Patel supervised planting around the edges. Neighbors, some I had never even spoken before, showed up with shovels and wheelbarrows. By sunset, we had the foundation complete. It wasn't just about the pond. It was about healing, about rebuilding something, together. And for the first time in years, Sycamore Heights finally felt like a community. That night, as I sat on my deck, staring at the empty pond that would soon be teeming with life, a car pulled into my driveway. A woman stepped out, her hands trembling as she held a small cooler. I recognized her instantly. Jennifer Wilson, Deborah's daughter. I stiffened. "What do you want?" She hesitated before handing me the cooler. I saved these when my mom wasn't looking. The day I opened it. Inside, 3 koi fish swam in a small makeshift tank. Survivors. My throat tightened. "I'm sorry for what she did," Jennifer said softly. "She's been like this my whole life." But no one ever stood up to her before. I looked at the fish, then back at her. Maybe some people were beyond redemption, but maybe, just maybe, some weren't. "Thank you," I said. As she drove away, Marcus appeared from next door, eyeing the cooler. "Are those—" I nodded, finally smiling. "Want to help me set up a temporary tank?" He laughed. "That's what neighbors are for." 3 days later, the neighborhood newsletter announced the first community picnic in 5 years. The location? The green space near my newly rebuilt koi pond. It would be the centerpiece for future monthly gatherings. Deborah's house? Put up for sale. She wouldn't be coming back. And as I watched my rescued koi swim, now joined by new baby fish donated by neighbors, I realized something important. Sometimes it takes concrete evidence to build a community that's truly solid.